What is up, guys? Back at it again with another video on this machine you see right in front of you. This is a 15-inch late 2008 MacBook Pro. I got this thing actually back in August of 2018, believe it or not, and I never talked about it in a video. I never mentioned it or anything. I got this from my good friend Chris, and I guess he got it in working condition from another person, and he just offloaded it to me. He was like, here, you can have this, and try to fix it. So I was under the impression that it didn't work at all. And so what I did was I brought it home and I tried to use it, and it wouldn't turn on. It had no signs of life whatsoever. But it apparently, it turned out that my adapter was bad. But so not knowing this, of course, I went ahead and sent it to my good friend Colin, aka DOSDude1, which is pretty much, he's pretty much internet famous now for his macOS patcher software, and I just think that's really funny that I've seen, his thing blow up this much. But anyway, I sent it to him because I'm pretty good friends with him, and he said he'd take a look at it and see if he could get it to work and perform any necessary repairs that it needed. So it turns out, in his testing, he had a good power adapter, of course, and so he said it worked on the AC adapter just fine, but it wouldn't work at all on the battery. And so he did some digging, apparently, and he said that it had a bad cap on the motherboard, so I went ahead and paid him to fix it, and so now this thing should be fully functional. So he sent it back to me yesterday, and here it is. I went ahead and threw some hardware in it and got it all set up, and so now I'm making a video on it. So when I got it, it was a little dirtier than this. Obviously, it was kind of a little banged up. You can see we have a pretty sizable dent in this region, but I mean, again, it was free, so not a big deal. But I went ahead and wiped the whole thing down with alcohol. This thing was a little bit dirtier than it is now, like I said. But yeah, of course, this was the first year of the unibody MacBook Pros. Of course, the early 2008 ones were the ones that, like, down there, which you can barely even see. But yeah, so this was the first model of the unibody MacBook Pros, so that's kind of cool to have. And I already have a late 2008 aluminum MacBook 13-inch, which is, pretty much the same industrial design, but it's nice to have a 15-inch and a MacBook Pro at that. So yeah, other than that dent in the side, it's in pretty decent shape. There's really not too much else in terms of physical damage going on with it. Of course, the bottom pan is a little bit scratched out, but that's kind of the way it is. So this is back when MacBook Pros had a two-piece bottom pan, and so pretty much all you got to do to open it is you just flip that thing, that latch there, and you can get to the battery. And in this case, I went ahead and threw in a Samsung 850 EVO SSD that I had spare, and so this thing is now actually pretty decent. So the battery, this is back when MacBook Pros still have removable batteries, so you can just pull the battery out just like that, and this battery is kind of yeeted, but we'll get to that in a second. I'll go ahead and throw that back in there. And then, of course, if you take these 10 screws out in the top, you can get to the RAM and the logic board and stuff, but I haven't needed to do that yet, so just do that, go ahead and flip that back down, and it's back together. So that's how the bottom pan works on these. So let me go ahead and change the camera angle, and I'll be right back. Alright guys, here we are with the laptop open. As you can see, nice glass screen. This is pretty much, the Retina's kind of just carried this design over and thinned it down, so it still looks quite modern, despite it being 11 years old. But yeah, pretty nice. Again, the interior is in pretty decent shape. The keyboard, of course, does have some wear, being, a very old computer, but yeah, other than that, it's in pretty decent shape. So this is back when MacBooks actually had a lot of ports on them. We actually have an express card right here, so that's kind of interesting. And I'm just noticing this part of the case is actually a little bit dented, but not a huge deal. You had two USBs, FireWire 800, Ethernet, line in, which is actually kind of neat, headphones, and the MagSafe power adapter, of course. So yeah, pretty decent port selection. And we also, I miss this about older MacBooks. I wish the newer ones still had this. You have a battery gauge, so that's really handy. And yeah, so that's a nice feature that we don't have anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, I guess without further ado, it's time to show you the software side of this machine. So let's go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and plug her in and fire it up. So it does take a second. And so I actually did use Colin's Mojave Patcher tool to go ahead and throw macOS Mojave on this thing. And so as you can see, we have a bit of a custom bootloader here for the APFS file system on the SSD, because these machines do not natively support booting from APFS volumes. But of course, Colin, being the genius that he is, he made it work. And of course, you know, there's a bunch of like little software patches to make it fully functional on this machine. And so it actually runs pretty decent, as you might be able to see in a second. But we also have some pretty decent hardware for the year going on here. So it does take a little while to boot up. You know, even though it has an SSD, it's still an 11-year-old computer, so it does take a second. But yeah. Okay, so now that finished booting, you can see that we are now in a fully working copy of macOS Mojave. So that's pretty nice. Of course, backlit keyboard like they all do. They all have, in other words. And let me go ahead and re-angle the camera here. Take a look at the screen. So, of course, this is before the Retina display, and so this is just a 1440 by 900 LCD panel with an LED backlight, so that's pretty decent. So let me go ahead and start with the specs, since I haven't really talked about it. So there it is, macOS Mojave. We have a 15-inch late 2008, which is what it is. This one is the base. It has the base processor, which is a 2.4 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo. I believe that is a P8600. And so there you go. We have 8 gigs of RAM, which I did not know was in this machine, and I actually purchased some RAM from another friend of mine that I intended to use in it, but turns out I didn't need to. It already has 8 gigs of 1333 megahertz DDR3 in it, so that's really cool. Of course, this machine does have the dedicated NVIDIA GeForce 9600M GT graphics card with 256 megabytes of memory, and I don't think these are susceptible to the same GPU failures that the 8600M GTs had in the older MacBook Pros, so I think I'm pretty good there. And it also has the integrated NVIDIA GeForce 9400M as a backup. So there you go. If we go over to our system report here, you can see that we have that Samsung 850 EVO SSD. Of course, this computer, my bad. Of course, this computer is limited to SATA 3. Or SATA 2, I mean, and so it's only 3 gigabits a second, so that is a little bit of a bottleneck on the SSD. I've ran a benchmark and I've only been able to get about 180 read and almost 300 write, which, I mean, that's about the limits of SATA 2. So, but with that said, the only other SSD I had to throw in there was this PM851, which is a lot slower. So I'm planning on using that in another machine. So anyway, that's about it for the specs. The battery is a little bit trashed, as you might be able to tell. So, yeah, I don't remember if this machine had a battery in it when I sent it to Colin, and so what I decided to do is, you know, I just asked him if he could throw a battery in it, and so I assume this is one of his, but I'm not 100% sure. It's a little bit beat. As you can see, it only holds 34% of its original capacity, 1642 milliamps. And that is actually less than my iPhone 8. So this battery is pretty well clapped. It has over 1,100 cycles on it, and I'm actually thinking about getting a new battery for this machine because they're relatively cheap used on eBay. So hopefully I can find one that's in a little bit better shape than this. But as you can see, the manufacture date of this Mac is February 2nd of 2009. So that's pretty interesting. It's, of course, it's a late 2008, so that must have been the newest machine available at the time. And yeah. So I don't really know what else to show. I haven't put too much in the terms of software on this machine. I just went ahead and loaded it up with Google Chrome. Of course, since it's Mojave, it can run the latest version of everything, which is nice, instead of being stuck on El Capitan. And yeah, so we can go ahead and type memes. Boom! And there you go. It displays memes with no problem. So that's about it. I don't really have too much else to show you in terms of software, other than it is, you know, a fully functional Mojave install thanks to Colin. And I intend to just use this machine. Honestly, I don't really know what to use it for, but this is now the nicest Mac I have besides my Retina MacBook Pro, which I use daily. And so this is a pretty nice piece from my collection, which I have actually downsized on, and you may notice that the room is looking a little bare. I'll have a video explaining all of that when the time comes. But for now, that's about all you get. There's my late 2008 MacBook Pro. I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.